destructors, how they would work in case of inheritance. Fine. So as I told, in case of inheritance, we always create object of the derived class. Fine. So if we are creating object of the derived class, definitely the responsibility of initializing the data members of the base class is whose responsibility is the derived class constructor's responsibility. Right? For example, let me say we have a class A and it's we'll say protected data member. Its protected data member is maybe int x, right? And we have a class B, which is publicly inheriting from class A. And in the public part, suppose maybe a private data member is int y. And in the public part, we are having constructor for class B. Whatever it is, maybe a default, maybe a parameterized constructor. We'll come to that later. But if I am going to create object of class B, then the constructor will only be called for which class? For class B, no matter what the constructor is. In this case, the default constructor will be called and y will be initialized with 0. Clear? Now, we have initialized the data member of class B, that is my derived class. But what about the data members of class A? Who is going to initialize them? So what they are saying is, if there is a constructor present in my base class, suppose I have a default constructor over here, then if the default constructor is present in my base class, then the default constructor will be automatically called by the compiler. I mean, at the compile time, this linking will be done from the derived class constructor. The base class constructor is called automatically. But if we want, we can also mention it explicitly, something like this, so that x in the default constructor, x is initialized with 0. If we want, we can mention a colon a, and just like we are calling the constructor, the default constructor, we have to mention like this. If we don't mention this part, then also it is fine. The compiler will call the base class constructor automatically. Fine. But if I am having a parameterized constructor, like this, a parameterized constructor is there, then I cannot expect the compiler to make a default constructor in my base class. This constructor will not be created by the compiler. We saw in the first unit, the default constructor is created only when no other type of constructor is created by the user, by the programmer, I mean. So if this constructor is not present in the base class, how will the compiler be able to call it? So that is why such calls are not implicitly made when there is no default constructor present in my base class. Is it clear? Any doubt up till now? Now, suppose object B is being created in a default way. So object B's data member is y. So it requires only one value to be passed like this for its creation, so that a parameterized constructor would get called, maybe A, and I would initialize y with A. Right? That is task of class B is done. It has initialized its own data member. But in that case, who is going to initialize the class A's data member, that is X. So in that case, what we have to do is whatever data members are required by the class, I mean the base class, that are also to be passed from the, I mean for while we create the object for the derived class. So I am passing 3 to be initialized, I mean to be assigned to Y, and 5 to be assigned to X. Okay, so definitely now the constructor of class B will have 2 arguments. Let us suppose int A and B, because it has to accept those 2 values. A I have utilized for initializing Y. What about B? So now I have to again mention a colon, mention A, and then pass B as the parameter to the parameterized constructor of my base class A. So this constructor would get called, and then X will be initialized with whatever is being passed to this constructor. Is it clear? That is why it is said it is the responsibility of the derived class constructor to call the base class constructor, either with or without the parameters. So this is with parameter, and if we just mention colon and don't mention any parameter, that is without parameter. Is it clear? Anyone having any doubt?
No, sir.
Fine. Remember, you can avoid this part. You can avoid this part if the base class is having the default constructor, either explicitly defined or created by the compiler. It should be present. Otherwise, you will be getting an error, because empty parenthesis means default constructor should be invoked, which is not possible if you don't have it. Okay,